It's so amazing to see you. Hello to you. My name is Alex, and today with you we will watch videos, probably videos, not one, about Brazil. I will try to understand a little bit more about Brazil, and what I will try to do. Um, I will try to look on some about some like information like GDP, population, and maybe capital of Brazil, ethnicity, and different facts about Brazil. And before we will start, I want to tell you that you can support me. Your likes, your comments will be appreciated by me. They're always appreciated, and yes, reason why I'm watching these videos about different countries quite simple, pretty logical, because I want to study here in Houston and I want to understand a little bit more about political science. And it looks like fascinating topic for me. And pretty often you can find YouTubers, they have some opinion, but their opinion is not based on facts. And pretty often I think that personally for me it would be useful to have opinion where I will be able to explain myself with facts in my background. Like, yeah, I think it is kind of useful to have objective opinion, to look on some facts, and usually watching such videos which I watching with you, I think it is useful for me personally as uh, yeah, it helping me to improve my knowledge about the world and a lot of stuff. And because yeah, I think that I said a lot for beginner, for introduction. Yes, I see already some eagles from our community. Hello to you. Thank you, Thomas Lee, for your support. I see your Alex uh, words and greetings. I appreciate this a lot, and it means really a lot for me. Yes, I'm Alex, and thanks for your support. Brazil. Before we will start to talk about Brazil, I want to tell you that, as usually, I have no knowledge about countries, and that's why my association with Brazil it is maybe song Shakira. She was singing this song, and it was a symbol of football games, like in a Champion Cup. For how's it named? FIFA. Yes, and that's what I know about Brazil. It is my main knowledge. I know Shakira. She's from Brazil. Probably I know a little bit more, but it is passive knowledge which I do not use. Yeah. But today I want to change my attitude towards Brazil and to show respect to people who is from Brazil. If you was in Brazil before, please leave your comments below. Why not? When you was, how expensive it was, maybe you will give your recommendations, what kind of hotel you advise to visit, and etc. etc. Leave your comments below if you was in Brazil, and if not, like, do you want to go to Brazil or not? Like, it would be interesting to know too. So many messages from you, Thomas Lee. Thank you, Thomas Lee, for your support. And yes, let's go. Yes, I was checking my sounds. It looks nice. I have good sound. Thanks. One moment. Yes, I was decided to increase a little bit light from this side. Okay, let's go. First video which we will watch, it will be short one short one uh, from channel Knowledge. Yes, from this amazing channel, Knowledge, and it is named how. Let's share screen. How did Brazil become a country? Obviously, it looks like Brazil has a huge background behind, and we back you up. Where is Lisa? Or what is happening? I mean, like, Alex is one of the reason. Alex usually doing live streams. I'm talking about myself in third first person. I mean, because when I have time, and yes, sometimes it is on schedule like today. And okay, Brazil. Before we will start, usual thing which I want to check: population of Brazil. Let's go. Population of Brazil. Gosh, population of Brazil is 214 million of people. It is quite big country. We can see that the USA has more population on 100 million and 120 millions like this. 100 maybe 15 millions population of the USA bigger than population of Brazil, but still, can you imagine? Brazil, it is country in South America. We can see gross domestic product 1.6 trillion US dollars, and also we can see GPT per capita of Brazil is 7.5 thousands. 7.5 thousands dollars. 7.5 thousands dollars it was on 2021, but we will look on GDP per capita. Obviously it will be separately, and we will look on ethnicity because it is helping in political science to understand a lot of things. Hello Adrian, happy to see you. Hello Alex and Thomas, happy to see you. Adrian, as always, hi, and I'm excited to see you. Let's look on other facts. GDP of Brazil. We will look. I hope that I will Brazil. S Z. Wow, not S. Pretty often I was using World Bank, and I want to use this website again too. It is quite convenient website and it's easy to look, to use. Yes, here we are. Hello Emma. Hello, happy to see you too. Yeah, hope that you can see the statistics in front of us on the screen. And this GDP of Brazil from 90s, 30 years we have graphic in front of us. And what we can see, if we will look on 19, let's look, 1990, we can see that Brazil had GDP, is it GDP? 461 billion. It is GDP current US dollars. Okay. 161 billion. It's not GDP. It cannot be. How it can be GDP? Please explain to me. Hello Jan Holder, happy to see you, so exciting. Hello, nice to see you Jan, nice to see you. welcome to our Eagle community, to our wonderful chat. World Bank National Account Data, OECD Accounts Data Files. Gosh. GDP current US dollars. Looks like yeah, looks like, and I want to compare this with Russia because I'm from Russian Federation, and I want to compare this because of few reasons. It's interesting for me to understand what is happening in Russia, and because I was living there, I am Russian. That's one of the things why I'm comparing. We can see a tendency a little bit the same, but what we can see also that it is 1.84 trillion in Russia, and Brazil 1.92. No, sorry, Russia 2.24 trillion. It was on 2022. But we need to think that populations of Russia, like on a little bit more, like on 40 million people, something like this, maybe 30, and that's why it is interesting. But then it's quite interesting. Okay. Next thing which we will look about Brazil. Next thing it will be, of course, ethnicity. Brazil ethnicity. Just curiosity, because demographic of Brazil we will look on by using Wikipedia. Usually they have quite we can see 77 life expectancy you can find here for males in Brazil, 74 years, for females 81. It is quite high, 81, and fertility rate is quite low, and 1.5, but infant mortality rate quite high. Wow, it is very interesting. What does it talking to us about? What does it mean when so high? Hello, Common Sense. Happy to see you. It's so nice to see you. Yes. Hello, last one. Wow, we have a lot of eagles in our community today, and it is amazing. It is amazing. What it means, I will not make any conclusions. We will just look at this and we will try to observe. But age structure here in Wikipedia quite interesting. And let's look Brazil on map. Brazil. Yes, such before watching like we know the South in America. Yes, such amazing, beautiful pictures, but still for those who doesn't know, because yes, you can see this amazing map, and here we are. We can see Brazil has a quite big territory. We can see that Brazil has a lot of neighbors, such as Uruguay, Paraguay, Bolivia, Peru, Colombia, Suriname, Venezuela. Yes, gosh. And Brazil has quite huge country and a lot of neighbors. And yes, I see your message last 1207 that you are trying to learn Portuguese. We will talk about also what kind of language official in Brazil. And maybe today we will try to find also out how it's happened, this about history. And yes, I'm trying to learn Portuguese, your message, last one, Alex. So far, I have made it to hola. It's different than Spanish hola. Everything is different. Yes, it is another language. It is another language, and I completely agree with you. I do not know Portuguese. I do not know Spanish, but I'm jealous to those people who knows several languages because it is giving you opportunity to understand more human minds. It is giving you opportunity to communicate with more people and try to understand maybe another way of thinking. And yes, yeah, I see your message, Alex. There is 331.9 million people in USA alone with. It is amazing. It is amazing. Of course, USA bigger by population, bigger country by GDP, etc., etc. But yes, I will watch probably in future, not probably for sure, videos about the USA because it is amazing country where I'm living now, and I hope that yes, I will do this video about the USA for sure, where I will try to understand such like from different perspectives a little bit more about the USA because I know little about the America, despite that I'm living here more than 1 year. Okay, let's go. We know where located Brazil, but to be sure, I want to be sure. What I want to find out also, it is Brazil, all neighbors, neighborhoods, countries. We can see this list. Brazil has 10 neighboring countries. 10. They are Uruguay, Argentina, Paraguay, Bolivia, Peru, Colombia, Venezuela, Guyana, Suriname, and French Guiana. Wow, 10 neighboring countries has Brazil, and obviously it is amazing. We can see all this information here on the screen, and it is fantastic. Okay, another thing which I wanted to watch before starting watching video, Brazil official languages. And we can see Portuguese is the official and national language of Brazil and is widely spoken by most of the population. The Portuguese dialects spoken in Brazil are collectively known as Brazilian Portuguese. Yes, we can find such amazing information. And I know that pretty often people who know Spanish, they somehow can able to communicate with people who know Spanish. Like who know Spanish, they can sometimes to understand Portuguese. Who know Portuguese, they can understand a little bit Spanish. At least I've heard about this, and I saw like in front of my eyes two guys who knows different languages. They're like, okay, they were understanding a little bit each other. And Portuguese, how popular, or maybe widespread Portuguese. Portuguese. Portuguese ranked fifth among world languages in number of native speakers. It also is widely spoken or studied as a second language in many other countries. With more than 200 million native speakers, Portuguese is one of the few languages spoken in such widely distributed parts of the world. And here I'm a little bit surprised, because I was believing, we saw that population of Brazil 214 million people, and here we can see that native speakers 200 million people. Maybe I did something wrong. Yes, with approximately 230 million native speakers and 25 to 30 million second language speakers. And altogether it is like 250 million total speakers. Yes, hello to everyone who joined to us. Hello, Police, Michigan ma'am. Hello to you. Happy to see you. Happy to see you. So excited. And let's look another facts. It was huge introduction before video. Really huge introduction. And let's watch video already. Like 20 minutes I was trying to understand basic facts about Brazil, and let's enjoy video itself. But it was quite useful, because pretty often sometimes when you are trying to understand about country, when you are doing in a fast way, you can pretty easily forget all what you've done. And here, this consciousness, attempt to understand Brazil, I think it is important. And pretty often in political science, knowing facts, it is helping you to look at world more, your results of your research will be more objective, and it is what we need. It's what we need. Yes, statistics helping a lot. Okay, let's go.
With a population of over 200 million people and evidence of life on its territory potentially dating back over 30,000 years, Brazil is a nation with a long and robust history. While its border touches nearly every other South American country, besides being the last country in the Americas to abolish slavery, Brazil stands out from its neighbors in a very relevant way. It was colonized by Portugal, not Spain. But how did this happen? How did Portugal shape Brazil? And how did the latter become the country that it is today?
Yes, sorry, I skipped a little bit because I had a message. Yes, Portugal shaped Brazil in some way. That's what I understood. Because of previous history. If I understand it, it was colony. Brazil was colony of Portugal.
First Portuguese explorer to reach Brazil did so in either the final years of the 15th century or in the 1500s exactly. According to Duarte Pacheco Pereira's book Esmeralda de Cito Orbis, he had found Brazil back in 1498 while on an expedition for King Manuel of Portugal. But this is not the generally accepted time.
Step into Wix Studio, the new web creation platform built for a
timeline. Instead, it's usually asserted that the first Portuguese expedition to reach Brazil came in 1500 with a fleet commanded by Pedro Álvares Cabral. He was actually on his way to India, but had been blown immensely off course and eventually spotted land. This led the fleet to make landfall at Porto Seguro, or Safe Harbor, and started the timeline of Portuguese colonization. Once it was realized that this newfound land was on the Portuguese side of the Tordesillas line, the initial goal was to establish a settlement with the focus of monopolizing trade, particularly of the widely popular pau-brasil redwood trees. This, of course, brought the Portuguese into direct interaction with the vast indigenous population in the area. At first, it's believed that the Portuguese settlers and the natives may have worked in harmony to harvest and trade the pau-brasil, but this was predictably short-lived as the situation evolved. As the redwoods were increasingly cut down and used for trade, more and more of Brazil's coast was being flattened, and there became a need to push farther and farther inland to find the trees. As one consequence of this, many of the colonists began to consider alternative forms of resource production for trade, such as the establishment of plantations.
Yes, of course, resources, natural resources, it is one of the main things which people were using. And before, yes, look at this amazing creature which I have. This little cutie, where I'm showing. Yes. Look at this. I don't know how to name what kind of name to give him. And thank you for this little amazing present to you, Holly. It is adorable. Okay, what we can understand now by watching this video. Brazil was colony of Portuguese. I want to look main exports product from Brazil now. Main export from Brazil. And exports, imports, and trade partners. Wow, so huge, so interesting website. We can see this information. I decided to make this bigger, and I want to see exports. Iron, soybeans. Iron, it is like 46 billions. Also we have here soybeans, crude petroleum, 30.7 billions, raw sugar, poultry meat, exporting mostly to China 88%, United States, Argentina, Netherlands, and Chile. China, it is like taking from them 88.3 billion dollars. They're exporting this. It was in 2021, if I understand correctly, and Brazil in 2021 was the world's biggest importer of mixed mineral or chemical fertilizers, pesticides, nitrogenous fertilizers, potassic fertilizers, and phosphatic fertilizers. Before, I've heard these statistics, not statistics, words that also Russia was a bigger exporter of fertilizers. Yeah, I've heard this. Maybe we need to compare this in future, the statistics. Anyway, we can see that Brazil exporting iron ore, whatever it is. You can see here a little bit information. Fastest growing markets, rank, and yeah, in case you can stop and to look this video. I mean, like, to look more carefully this information which was showing on the screen.
Thus ended the collaboration between the Portuguese and the natives, as the former decided that the best way to work their plantations was by enslaving the latter. The result of this was the death and fleeing of dozens upon dozens of indigenous who either hoped to escape slavery, had fallen ill to newly introduced European diseases, or would later die in slavery due to the extreme labor conditions. Those who did flee were not guaranteed safety either, as Jesuit missionaries and Portuguese bandeirantes would push inland, exposing the escaped natives to disease nonetheless, and at the hands of the bandeirantes, enslaving even more. By the mid-1530s, Brazil had been divided up into over a dozen individual colonies to be owned and governed by the affluent Portuguese nobles, though all but one of these settlements would eventually be returned to the Portuguese crown in 1543, as they had failed to truly succeed. A new governor-general was subsequently sent to manage the territory, and a capital was established in Salvador. The Portuguese were not the only European power that wanted in on the action in Brazil, however. Aside from the occasional border dispute with Spain, Portugal didn't have to worry much about their Iberian neighbor thanks to the Treaty of Tordesillas from the century prior. It was this agreement that clearly placed Brazil into Portugal's realm of expansion, not Spain's, although outside of Iberia and the Pope himself, who had passed the papal decree solidifying the treaty, no one really accepted these boundaries. As a result, France, England, and other colonial powers were eager to reach Brazil themselves and take what lands they could. The French in particular tried to wedge themselves onto the map, but were consequently beaten back by the Portuguese in the latter half of the 16th century. The Dutch as well would take a shot at seizing part of Brazil, but they too would eventually give in to the possessive Portuguese. And while the Portuguese did manage to hold strong against their outside rivals, within Brazil, some issues began to arise that required fast solutions.
Yeah, I can imagine that it was quite intensive relationships between these European powers, and I think that history has, of course, obviously a direct impact on us these days, like what was happening hundreds of years ago. It has impact on present days, even if we are not noticing this and do not think about the history itself. It doesn't mean that it's not influencing on our basic lives. We just accepting reality, and that's why it is kind of like it is what it is. But I think that when you said about that some of you are trying to learn Portuguese, I'm thinking immediately how long it takes to study Portuguese for a native English speaker. That kind of question is bothering me at this moment. How long does it take to study Portuguese? If you speak English. And oh, no way. Visual Capitalist reports that it takes 24 weeks. Can you imagine? Boop. It is. I think it is adorable. We cannot tell that this story is not adorable. But if we are talking about Portuguese, it takes 600 hours. 600 hours it takes to study Portuguese. Hello, Sam Smith Q. I'm so excited to see you. Thank you for your presence and your support. And we can see 600 hours it can take to learn Portuguese, according to the Foreign Service Institute. FSI that earns it a category number 1 status according to that ranking, showing that Portuguese is one of the fastest languages to learn. Gosh, it is amazing. It is amazing. Okay, showing that Portuguese is one of the fastest languages to learn. 600 hours. Gosh, I don't know what kind of level you can achieve. I believe maybe interesting. Maybe intermediate. Maybe, who knows?
Facing a growing need for slaves and a declining local population, Portugal looked to Africa to boost its Brazilian colony. The indigenous population in Brazil had been greatly reduced, but at the same time, the settlers in Brazil had an increasing need for workers at their plantations and elsewhere. It was at this time that the Portuguese looked to Africa. Having already kick-started the Atlantic slave trade the century prior, they now looked to bring workforce from Africa over to Brazil instead of Europe. Doing so would open the transatlantic slave trade, which would go on to have its own dark history over the centuries. But for now, it served as Portugal's solution to the dying off native population.
I saw war.
Okay.
I saw bombing. I saw.
And the Portuguese didn't do this in small numbers either. In fact, roughly 40% of African slaves involved in the transatlantic slave trade would end up in Brazil, over 8 times the amount that ended up in the United States. Nevertheless, despite the grotesqueness of their method of choice, the Portuguese in Brazil managed to find great success in trade and developing the colony altogether. New minerals and resources were found in Brazil that could be exported at high rates, while additional trade markets would also be opened up as the Portuguese had more to give. By now, Brazil was beginning to resemble its modern form, as its culture diversified and the capital was moved to Rio de Janeiro. This preceded another period.
That's what I want to know now. Capital of Brazil, is it still Rio de Janeiro or not? Like basic information, just basic, I want to know. Like capital of Brazil. It looks like this, capital of Brazil. Yes, it looks like Rio de Janeiro, the current capital of Brazil since its construction in 1960 is Brasilia. Rio de Janeiro was country's capital between 1763 and 1960. I want to know a little bit more about this because it is quite fascinating. I see this message. Sam! Polly! I'm so excited. Sam! I can imagine like he was typing this. Gosh. Yes, we can see here. Salvador also was capital. The city of Salvador served as the seat of the Portuguese colonial administration in Brazil for its first 2 centuries and is usually called the first capital of Brazil. Salvador was first, okay. Yes, by itself they told this, but I just wanted to look at this and to check maybe in Wikipedia.
Period of considerable change and movement toward contemporary Brazil, now in the early 19th century when Napoleon decided to shake things up back in Europe, and also in South and Central America. The Portuguese royal family would be forced to flee their homeland and opted to stay in Brazil while they were away. Upon their arrival, there sprouted a newfound motivation to put more effort into Brazil's local economy and development than had been done prior. This helped to shift Brazil from just a tool of Portugal to its own functioning entity and ultimately primed it for independence. Schools, banks, and other important structures were built, more ports were opened, and Brazil began to flourish. It was at this time that the royals could finally return home to Portugal. But Pedro I, the son of Dom João VI, was left behind to govern Brazil on behalf of Portugal, although he had other ideas. Once left to his own devices, Pedro decided that Brazil deserved more than Portugal could give, and was worth more than it had ever been given credit for. So he declared its independence. Previously, in 1815, Dom João had declared Brazil to be its own kingdom, although it would remain under the watchful eye and heavy hand of Portugal until September 7, 1822. Independence or death, Pedro is said to have shouted from the banks of the Ipiranga River upon announcing the newfound sovereignty of his adopted nation. He was soon crowned as Emperor of Brazil, just in time for a building threat from the Portuguese, a threat that would lead both sides into a bloody war. The Brazilian...
sometimes you can find that countries building history like everything was around a world involving around this exactly country. I saw this many times in Russia, because yes, and it is interesting that you can find other countries which have quite interesting history behind. It is really fascinating. It is giving you opportunity to have more passion towards others, like wow, I mean, like wow. Why not? I mean, it is amazing when we are talking about history. It's always important to look how, to compare with others sometimes. Yeah, it's fascinating. I'm just lucky and I'm happy that I found this video with you. And okay, they were fighting for independence, or not fighting, but they declared independence. And that's what I want to know. Independence, Brazil. Independence. Independence Day. When they celebrating. It is on September 7th. September 7th. And probably that I didn't show flag, but I think that everyone knows how flag of Brazil looks like. It looks like everyone knows, but I personally do not know meaning behind of this flag, like meaning of colors. Maybe we will be able to see this on our screen right now, and I will read to you this meaning. The green color is a symbol of the flora and fauna of Brazil. The yellow represents gold. Wow, it is an interesting choice. And the blue globe and stars symbolize the night sky, filled with stars and constellations, a group of stars that form a pattern that also stands for the country's states. You can see how many meanings has Brazil flag. All of them has deep and interesting like meaning. And one I like this, like this globe represents planet, probably sky, states represent stars, and states. it is amazing. Like when you look in the sky, people from Brazil, they think about own country. If some people will think about aliens, it's not in case with Brazilian people. They will like, oh, there is my state. This like interesting. Of course, I'm joking, but yes. It is just a fascinating knowledge, and gold like yellow makes sense. It makes really sense, and it is maybe affirmation. We will be rich. We will be rich. That's why they decided to have. Yeah, it is fun. Cool. It is cool. I mean, it is cool. Okay. They have. But right now. Maybe, yeah, we will look another video today about Brazil a little bit, and I will try to understand a little bit. Maybe I want to look. I see here king sitting on the throne, and I want to see what kind of hat he has. I mean, like, not hat, it is not crown. Like, maybe you can find this crown, photo of this crown on the internet. Oh, let's look immediately. Why to delay? You definitely will not find, say, this crown. Yeah, in every day. Okay. Crown of Brazil. And here we are. How it looks exactly, exact imperial crown of Brazil. The imperial crown of Brazil, also known as the crown of Dom Pedro II, or as the Diamantine crown, so called because all of its precious stones are diamonds, is the crown manufactured for the second Brazilian emperor. Gosh. What can I tell? Looks expensive. Looks luxury. Probably this crown already 100 years. It's all made from diamond and... yeah. In 1822, quickly manufactured in 1822 for the coronation of Brazil's first emperor. They did this like fast, but it looks like how they did this fast, like wow. Gosh. 1822, it's like 200 years this crown. Gosh.
The Brazilian army and their local militia allies would clash with the Portuguese forces until the end of 1823 as they grappled for control over the former colonies. Fought by land and sea, the war would ultimately end in Brazil's favor when the final Portuguese garrison backed down, leaving the newly independent state in shame. The following period for Brazil was far from easy nonetheless, and internal struggles would eventually lead Pedro to abdicate his throne to his 5-year-old son, Pedro II, and subsequently handed the empire over to a line of regents who would rule in the young boy's place until 1840. Clashes with Brazil's South American neighbors would furthermore test the sovereignty of the young nation. But nothing seemed to dampen the spirits of Brazilian trade, nor immigration into the country. Nevertheless, Brazil's time as an empire would shortly come to a close in 1889, a year after slavery was abolished.
Oh, advertisement.
Abolished by the monarchy. In its place was founded the Brazilian Republic, known now as the Old Republic. By 1930, after a string of generally mild presidents, Getúlio Vargas would seize power with a military coup and ruled as a dictator until 1945. The following decades were scarcely less turbulent, however, although efforts were being made by elected presidents to stimulate Brazil's economy and development. Through the 1960s, Brazil would fall under the control of the military, which would command the nation with its harsh methods until 1985, with inflation soaring. The economy was struggling, to say the least, even as Brazilians adopted a new constitution in 1988, and inflation would remain a dreadful obstacle until the 1990s. From that point on, though still entrenched in deep economic and political struggles, Brazil showed resilience nevertheless. And through it all, it had shown the ability to become and remain independent. Had Portugal never colonized its land, it's hard to know what Brazil would be like today. But thanks to the Portuguese colonization that did happen, wherever it stands morally, Brazil was able to become a notable colony and later kingdom of its own. And thanks to the help of the exiled monarchs from Portugal, the colony-turned-kingdom would soon become a sovereign empire turned republic. Natural resources and reliable trade additionally
He's telling thanks to them for colonization? What? I mean, like, thanks for colonization. It looks like this in my mind. And maybe I'm wrong. I mean, like, come on. How can you tell thanks for colonization? No. I mean, history just happened. It just happened like this. I would not tell thanks to anyone for colonization because it's just happened historically. Okay, it's happened. Next, I mean, like, to tell thank you for this anyone, I think it's not necessary. Why? Yep, like, it's strange, like, the last words was
Brazil to put itself on the map. And today, it stands as not only an independent country in South America, but as a unique nation among its neighbors, as the only product of the Portuguese side of the Tordesillas line.
Maybe he's right in some way that I'm not understanding something. It was this video, by the way, was made 1 year ago, in case if you want to know. And obviously history very interesting by itself, because why I'm talking a little bit when we are talking about colonization, I'm looking at this a little bit like colonization. It doesn't matter where it is colonization. And if we are talking about Russia, colonization in Russia, colonial this territory, it is bad. A lot of people looking at this. And here he's talking like colonization everywhere. It is not so fun story. Because sometimes people can be forced to do some stuff. But by itself, yes, historically it's happening. It is part of our life. I mean, it is like happening pretty often. Face red heart shape. Face red heart shape. Face red heart shape. I do not know. It is. I see only letters in our chat. Okay, anyway. Thank you, Jan. Yes, it is quite fascinating story. I like this story. And right now, we will watch a little bit another, like what I want to look right now. It is another fact about Brazil. Biggest cities by population. Brazil biggest cities. Oops. Let's look, we will use a website which is named Statista. I was using this website before. And here we have that it is in million inhabitants. So SP it is Sao Paulo, something like this. It has 11.45 million. Second one, it is capital Rio de Janeiro, 6.2 million. Brasilia, it is third by population, has 2.8 million. And we can count, obviously, amount of cities, expand statistics. How many cities has Brasilia, which have a million people by population? Let's look. St. Louis, it is the last one, okay? Let's count. São Paulo 1, Rio de Janeiro 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, Porto Alegre, 12, 13, gosh, 14, 15 cities. 15 cities in Brazil, they have population like million people. 15. Can you imagine? 15. He cannot imagine how much is it, but I can. Okay. Let's go. Another video which I want to watch with you today. It is named Brief Political History of Brazil, because first video was named How Did Brazil Become a Country? It is like at the beginning we know a little bit. I want to understand this thing that Brazil was colony. They became then empire, and other like in future sorry, one moment, I want to change my screen. Yes, now I understand. Brazil at first was colony, this was taken by Portugal, they became independent empire, and then already they became already another country like now. But as for political scientists, I think it is not enough. Obviously, just to watch the videos, like it will take, like, it is also not enough. It is like a level where you can be like not so good level, not professional level. But still, that's why now we will watch Brief Political History of Brazil. This video was made from when it was made. One moment. 3 years ago. That's we need to know. 3 years ago was made this video. Okay, let's go. Brief political history.
Brazilians love to say that Brazil is the country.
One moment. From the beginning.
Brazilians love to say that Brazil is the country of the future, and it will always be. This jaundiced view comes from a particular reading of their own history. To find out why, join me for a brief explainer on Brazilian history and politics. Our account begins in 1500 when a Portuguese nobleman, Pedro Álvares Cabral, and his fleet landed in near present-day Bahia, somewhere in northeastern Brazil. They got there by mistake, or so the story goes, as they were aiming for India and got blown off course. Greeted by a group of nomadic natives, forests of red-hued timber dubbed Brazil wood, and a lack of precious metals, Cabral's expedition left after just 8 days. For the next 30 years, the Portuguese and the rest of Europe paid little attention to the area. This began to change, however, in 1530, in response to the increasing presence of the French along the coast of Brazil, as well as the increase in global sugar production for which Brazil was aptly suited.
Sugar production.
The Portuguese returned, but unlike the Spanish, their colonization model remained exclusive to the coasts, a legacy that persists to this day as the vast majority of Brazilians still live within a few hours of the Atlantic Ocean. The country's path towards independence began in 1808, when Napoleon's Iberian invasion forced the Portuguese court to resettle to Brazil.
Yeah.
At that point, the crown's largest and wealthiest colony. After Prince João arrived in Rio de Janeiro, along with the entire royal court, packed into some 36 ships, he was able to make the colony co-equal with Portugal and establish in Brazil the trappings of a developed economy. He also created a strong centralized bureaucracy. Brazil's patrimonial state, a bureaucratic power serving its own interests, had begun.
Yeah.
Unlike other Latin American countries, Brazil had a swift and non-violent independence. Don João left his son Pedro as a regent after returning.
Brazil, unlike other Latin American countries, Brazil had a swift and non-violent independence. This is interesting from political perspectives, because we often see that independence for some countries, it is quite a difficult process. And in Russia there was a Russian Revolution, in French, in the USA there was, like many countries have quite difficult transferring from one to another type of government or whatever. And yes, it is interesting. It is quite interesting. No, like independence from other countries. Russia was not colony of any country except Mongolia. Yes. It was not colony. They kind of... it wasn't colony. What it was? When we will watch, we will find out. Right now, I will not tell you all this. Anyway, yes, it is interesting. It is interesting.
To Lisbon, and when soon after the Portuguese insisted on trying to return Brazil to its former colonial status, Dom Pedro balked and declared the country independent. The Brazilian Empire was born. The moment itself, on September 7, 1822, was uneventful. It basically consisted of Pedro drawing his sword and proclaiming independence or death when he received a letter outlining the Portuguese demands. There was some fighting between the two sides, but it was nowhere near as violent or prolonged as in Spanish America. In fact, it only took 3 years for Portugal to recognize Brazilian independence. This helped Brazil enjoy a smooth transition from colonial to independent power. Thus began a pattern in Brazil that has held constant through the centuries. The country has avoided dramatic political and social ruptures, opting instead for incremental change, or in some cases, little change at all. At no point in Brazil's history has it experienced a revolution or social uprising that has prompted meaningful or sustained transformation of its existing social structures.
He said this so fast. Yes, I need to realize this. At no point in Brazil's history has it experienced a revolution or social uprising that has prompted meaningful or sustained transformation of its existing social structures. Okay, I got it, understood. All this process, like for during 3 years, it wasn't so difficult process and painful process like for other countries. Yeah, it is good.
Peaceful existence, but has also meant that in terms of elite dominance over political and economic institutions, not much has changed since the days of the Bragança monarchy. This is not to say that conflict has been completely absent from Brazilian life. Take the Brazilian Empire, for example. It lasted from 1822 to 1889, or 67 years. But while the monarchy itself was never close to being removed prior to that date, it experienced a number of crises that brought the country itself to the brink of separation. This occurred as a result of the sudden departure of Dom Pedro I in 1831, who, despite having given up his claim to the Portuguese throne, when his younger brother Dom Miguel tried to take the throne from his daughter, Maria, he returned to Portugal to lead the forces to stop the usurpation. Dom Pedro succeeded, but died of typhoid only 3 years later. That left his son, Dom Pedro II, a 5-year-old, theoretically in charge. But while he came of age, a regency ruled in Brazil.
Wow.
The absence of the monarch brought factional conflicts, and the region struggled to keep peace. There were multiple uprisings during this period, including 5 in Rio de Janeiro state alone, along with other separatist rebellions.
Oh, I see this map, and immediately I want to ask myself questions. How many regions or states has Brazil? Like, how many of them? Like, Brazil? Okay, how many states have? We can see 26 states. Yes, 26. And they called estados. And one federal district, Districta Federal. The states are generally based on historical, conventional borders which have developed over time. The states are divided into municipalities, while the federal district assumes the competence of both a state and municipality, while the federal district assumes the competence of both state and... Okay, yes, I got it. Okay, 26 states and 1 federal district. Yes. Let's go. Yep.
In Bahia,
Dom Pedro II. Yes, they were talking about Pedro II, Brazil, many times. I want to look this Dom, about him a little bit. Pedro II, Brazil. I want to look a little bit about his life. Wow. That's how he looks, and the Empire of Brazil. And maybe to read a little bit. Of course, this information, like these attempts, they like I'm looking on the surface, but still it is interesting. Pedro, poor Pedro, lost both his parents at an early age. Poor thing. His mother died in 1822 when Pedro, because I mean like I'm orphan, I can afford such jokes. Yes. His mother died in 1829 when Pedro was only 3. His father, Pedro the Elder, returned to Portugal in 1831, when young Pedro was only 5. Pedro the Elder would die of tuberculosis in 1834. Young Pedro would have the best schooling and tutors available, including José Bonifício de Andrade, one of the leading Brazilian intellectuals of his generation. Maybe this is one of the reasons why these transactions changing was not so bloody, because this Pedro, he decided like, no way, not on in my shift. He was had this emotion attached. His beloved governess Mariana de Verna. Wow. Called the Dama, and who was a surrogate mother for the young boy, and Raphael, an Afro-Brazilian war veteran who had been a close friend of Pedro's father. Yeah, he was excellent student, happy for him. And we can see that there was coronation in 1831, marriage to Teresa Cristina of the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies. Pedro Emperor of Brazil. I don't know. Looks like he had quite good life. There was even the War of the Triple Alliance. Wow. He had interesting life. Okay. That Pedro as a child.
Maranhão, Minas Gerais, Pará, Rio Grande do Sul, and Sao Paulo. That Brazil did not disintegrate during that period in comparison to most of Spanish America was due to 3 reasons. The first was the leadership of Luís Alves de Silva, the future Duke of Caxias, who was adroit in putting the rebellions down.
When you can hear Portuguese, Spanish, every time when you hear these languages, let's show my face, I think it is, for me, every time it is like so melodic. It's like and it is interesting, and the way how he's pronouncing, I'm sure that this guy which is doing this video, he for sure knows Spanish or maybe Portuguese, because the way how he's pronouncing, because I will write this as my Russian will be dominate in pronunciation, and he definitely knows how to pronounce this. Luís Alves de, it's how I would say, Lima y Silva, Duke of Caxias, but he said this completely differently. Like example, let's listen how he say this. Yes, it is fascinating. And we watched today that Portuguese, it will take for you to study Portuguese 600 hours. 600. I do not believe that it will take so little. I believe it will take much more. It depends, of course, from what kind of level you want to have. But still, for 2 years, you will have a high possibility to achieve intermediate level in Portuguese. Plus 250 people will understand you. Amazing, amazing. And yes, if you are studying Portuguese, I saw in our community you were studying Portuguese. Why not? It sounds like a lot of fun. Okay, let's go. I want to listen how he pronounced again.
First was the leadership of Luís Alves de Silva,
Luís Alves de Silva,
future Duke of Caxias.
Duke of Caxias. Caxias, okay.
Was adroit in putting the rebellions down. The second was the specter of social revolt and social disintegration, which kept the elite united. And finally, the coronation of Dom Pedro II, who helped give the Brazilian elite someone to rally around. This period, however, was not inconsequential. The autonomy the Regency provided to the several regions to stop the rebellions ended up cementing Brazilian federalism as a norm. Another conflict with serious consequences was the war with Paraguay in 1864. Brazil had lost Uruguay, its Cisplatin province, in 1828, but it continued to meddle in its internal affairs. When it tried to impose a government in Uruguay, the opposing Uruguayan side asked Paraguay and its dictator, Francisco Solano Lopez, for help. The Paraguayan leader warned the Brazilians that any troops it sent to Uruguay would be considered a declaration of war on Paraguay, but the Brazilians ignored him, thinking it was a bluff. They were wrong. Problem was that when the Paraguayans marched to fight the Brazilians, they marched through neutral Argentine territory, which then prompted Argentina to also declare war on Paraguay. It soon was a triple alliance, Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay, with the troops led by Duke of Caxias that completely decimated Paraguay, but still dragged on for 6 years, mostly because the Paraguayans refused to surrender, and it took the Allies.
You can see these flags, this blue, white, blue flag reminds me right now a little bit Russian opposition flag. It is of course different, I know, but you can see Russian opposition flag, and you can see images. It looks like a little bit opposite, like white, blue, white. It is like they decided to take off red because it is red, symbolizing blood, and like people thinking that they like logic like this. Нет войне, it means like no war, and that's why they took this blood, like, or maybe red color off, and that's why it represents right now as color, as how would say, for opposition, symbol for Russian opposition. Yes, just if you will look at this flag, why I noticed this, because you can see logical. My mind immediately, wow, I know a little bit different colors, and yes. Okay, let's go.
Allies a long time to marshal effectively all of their resources.
It's going to show us the effectiveness of the HEPA filter versus a vehicle that does not have
What
the
is
HEPA.
that?
Bioweapon defense mode engaged.
So the cabin.
There were a number of consequences for Brazil. These included the growth of manufacturing, the building of roads, and the settling of European immigrants in the southern provinces, the professionalization of the armed forces and their concentration in Rio Grande do Sul, and the increased power of the central government. Most important for the future, the war brought the military firmly into the political arena. Military officers were keenly aware that the war had exposed the military's lack of equipment, training, and organization. They blamed these shortcomings on civilian officials. In the next decades, reformist officers would be one of the reasons for the fall of the empire.
Okay.
The other reason was the abolition of slavery. Brazil was the last country in the Western world to abolish it in 1888. Even then, the country's abolitionist Golden Act was promulgated by Princess Isabel, while Don Pedro II was traveling in Europe. Final abolition, therefore, did not come about from a disruptive civil war as in the United States. Rather, it was facilitated economically by the advent of cheap labor from European immigrants. The long-lasting institution of slavery in Brazil meant that the Brazilian state didn't invest in the education, health, or development of poor Brazilians for centuries. And the sheer magnitude of the slave trade, an estimated 4 to 5 million slaves came to Brazil from Africa, made the longevity of slavery that much more corrosive to any semblance of republican rule after the end of the empire. Slavery left a deeply ingrained class hierarchy in which the white elite was educated and wealthy, and the darker-skinned slaves and working class were poor and neglected. Indeed, the legacy of slavery was to be felt for centuries to come. But in 1889, it had a more immediate effect. Its abolition was the final blow to any remaining belief in the crown's neutrality, and this resulted in an explicit shift of support to republicanism by the ultra-conservatives who realized they no longer needed the crown to protect their interests. Taking advantage of cabinet crisis in 1888 and 1889, and of rising frustration among military officers, Republicans drew them into a conspiracy to replace the cabinet in November 1889. Led by Field Marshal Fonseca, what started as an armed demonstration demanding...
One of the things that, again, in school program in Russia, we do not study usually about Brazil or Chile or Argentina. I mean, like a couple times you can find these countries in your books and maybe a few short texts. I mean, that's why for me it is like a so different world. I mean, like you can find some information, but majority, and you will be surprised. Another thing, because I want to tell you, I all my life was living in far east of Russia. What does it mean? We have border with China, But you will be surprised that we have border with China, North Korea, and Japan in Primorsky region. Like, oops, interesting location. But what you will find out there, that people know so little about their neighbors, because I believe that majority of population, they live on western part of Russia, and on eastern part of Russia, example like my Primorsky Krai region or Khabarovsky Krai, Khabarovsky region, you will see that they're studying school program about world history, how Russian must see this world from school. It was made and signed in Moscow. Like people usually who is living in forest of Russia, like I know from my experience, I know so little from school about China, about Korea, and about Japan. I know like only some things like people usually studying more about this European history. But like it is forest of Russia, it is Siberia. Why people do not teach? It is strange for me. Yes, it is very, very strange. It is present. I want to give him name. And just I need to find quite a suitable name for this amazing koala or sloth. Koala? Yes, anyway, you can see this closer. Yes. It is a very interesting thing because I think that in future maybe they will change this attitude towards history in Russia, but yes, at this moment, well, that's why I think that it is important to know a little bit more about other countries too. It is giving me like, wow, you can find this, that. This giving you opportunity to understand a little bit more about the world itself. Yeah.
Replacement of a cabinet turned
Sloth.
within hours into a coup d'etat, deposing Emperor Pedro II. In true Brazilian fashion, however, the political transition brought little upheaval. The coup had almost no support outside a clique of military leaders, but Dom Pedro II had become wary of emperorship and despaired over the monarchy's future prospects. Despite his popularity, he did not allow his ouster to be opposed and did not support any attempt to restore...
Sorry, I was distracted. I was distracted by sloth. Let's release on last minute. Sorry.
And despaired over the monarchy's future prospects. Despite his popularity, he did not allow his ouster to be opposed and did not support any attempt to restore the monarchy. This overthrow led to the country's first attempt at republican democracy, what Brazilians call República Velha, or Old Republic. It was modeled around the United States, but in this constitutional democracy, the republic did not have enough popular support to risk open elections, so they were rigged, and the landed oligarchs ruled. The café con leite, coffee with milk power sharing arrangement, emerged, whereby the presidency would alternate between Brazil's two largest states, Sao Paulo and Minas Gerais, respectively coffee and dairy producers. This system consolidated the power and influence of the old monarchical elite and devolved the country into a dominant coronelismo, or ruled by local oligarchs known as coronage, who would dispense favor in exchange for loyalty. It would take decades for demographic changes and the structural shifts in the economy, especially the growth of the urban middle class, to amass...
Yeah, it was like oligarchs, like in these rich people, they took power and for during decades they were changing. And let's look when was last elections in Brazil. Elections in for president. It was next will be in 2026. Does Brazil have an elected president? Electoral system. Brazil's president and vice president are elected as a joint ticket using the two-round system. The first round of elections is held on the first Sunday of October, which in 2022 on October 2nd. A candidate who receives more than 50% of the total valid votes in the first round is elected. Yes, if you will take 50, it is named electoral system. Electoral system when a candidate taken receiving more than 50% of votes. And yes, next presidential elections will be in October 2026. Okay, we got it.
Enough power, especially as a result of the Great Depression, to threaten the power of the agrarian oligarchies. The specific issue that ended up toppling the old government structure was disagreement over who should be president. In 1930, President Washington Luiz was someone from Sao Paulo, and thus the presidency was supposed to revert back to someone backed by Minas Gerais. But Luiz demurred and picked another Paulista, Julio Prestes, who then went on to win the presidency in March 1930. This, in turn, prompted a coordinated revolt months later, which would eventually lead to a coup and the arrival on the scene of a man that would go on to dominate Brazilian politics for 20 years, Getúlio Vargas. Vargas was born in Rio Grande do Sul and was member of the Gaúcho-landed oligarchy. He had risen through the system of patronage and clientelism, but he had a fresh vision of how Brazilian politics could be shaped to support national development. He understood that with the breakdown of direct relations between workers and owners in the expanding factories of Brazil, workers could become the basis for a new form of political power, populism. His rule oscillated between dictatorship and popularly elected government as he sought to transform Brazil from a...
Pretty often you can hear such a word as it is populism. And I want to know populism meaning just by itself. Populism is a range of political stances that emphasizes the idea of the people and often juxtapose this group with the elite. It is frequently associated with anti-establishment and anti-political sentiment. Have no idea what he said. In easy mode. Simple. Simple explanation. It's not a simple explanation, sorry. What is populist for dummies like me? We have this, like, it's exactly for me. What is populist for dummies? Populism is a name for a kind of political movement. Populists usually try to make differences between common people and elites, meaning usually top classes of people. Populists may think of wealthy people or well-educated people as belonging to the class of elites. Yes. Okay. I understood this simple explanation for dummies like me. It makes sense more now than ever. And okay. I see this explanation. It is great. It helped. It helped. I mean,
based economy into an industrialized powerhouse using government intervention. This culminated with the Estado Novo, or New State, where Vargas's government revolved entirely around the idea of developmentalism. This was expressed not only in strong rhetoric, but also by lending protection to domestic industries and by devoting state funding to investment aimed at kickstarting strategic sectors and setting up the necessary infrastructure. Vargas created state monopolies for oil, Petrobras, mining, Vale, steelmaking, the National Siderurgy Company, and automobiles, the National Motors Factory. His last presidential term was a period of deepening political polarization. The military saw red in every attempt to expand labor's influence and objected to wage increases for workers when the value of their own salaries was eroding steadily. Meanwhile, the administration was hampered by an economic crisis, congressional opposition, and impatience among his supporters. There were charges of corruption against his closest associates, and when one of his aides appeared to have been directly involved in an assassination attempt against an opposition journalist and in the death of an Air Force major, the armed forces seemed to be prepared to push Vargas to resign. Faced with the possibility of a coup, or perhaps in an effort to avoid possible bloodshed, Vargas committed suicide. Whatever his intention, his suicide had a powerful effect. It was able to postpone a coup for a while, but it still eventually came, this time on March 31st, 1964.
It's like sometimes people believe, or maybe, I don't know, because of policy, they're ready to do sometimes crazy stuff. Politics. Gosh, I mean, like, to do suicide? Wow.
Bloodless. There was little support for the then president, João Goulart, and even his base, the labor unions, failed to rise in his favor. Most political leaders regarded military rule as the only alternative to strikes, mutinies, and daily chaos. While the president chosen after the coup, Humberto Castelo Branco, sincerely believed that the armed forces were merely engaged in using its moderating power and would soon transition to a more reliable civilian president, his was a minority view within the military. Instead, they would go on to rule Brazil for more than 20 years. During that time, free speech was curbed and any opposition crushed. Hundreds of people were killed and disappeared, and although these numbers were low compared to neighboring countries, the use of torture was widespread. This included rape and castration. Beginning in the 1970s, mostly as a result of massive economic upheaval, the dictatorship began to relax its stranglehold on democracy. Finally, in 1985, after massive mobilization across the country that demanded direct presidential elections, the military stepped down, paving the way for Brazil's current period of participatory government and a new constitution in 1988. The new constitution enshrined fundamental rights for women, indigenous people, and other minorities, and also created multiple avenues for direct popular participation besides regular voting, such as referendums and the ability of ordinary citizens to propose laws.
I want to look for, like, 1988, they created a new constitution. Okay, I understand this, but I want to look another thing, like languages. The most popular list, like Portuguese, like that's like for me the most interesting thing. Of course, here to look on Portuguese. It is one English, Mandarin, or maybe the like Hindi, Spanish, French, Arabic, Bengali. Portuguese, here we can see 257 plus million speakers, and number 9. It is number 9, and first language speakers 232 millions. Portuguese is another language that expanded worldwide during the European European colonial period. Today, Portuguese is the official language of 9 countries in Europe, South America, Africa, and Asia. Brazil is the largest country out of those 9 and has the most Portuguese speakers. Brazil's largest population makes Portuguese the most widely spoken language in the southern hemisphere. Yes, we can see. Number 9 by speakers.
Nonetheless, the patrimonial order remained intact through the first several democratically elected presidents. The first, Collor de Mello, ended up impeached and removed over corruption allegations. The second, Fernando Henrique Cardoso, a renowned sociologist best known for his work on dependency theory, an economic policy usually associated with the left, ended up embracing neoliberal economics. And although he was able to curb the massive inflation the country had been experiencing for nearly a decade, his economic policies, particularly privatization, led to huge unemployment rates and very high inequality. In theory, this was supposed to change with the election of Luiz Inácio da Silva, better known as Lula, in 2002. A shoeshine boy turned union leader, championing labor rights and more equal distribution of wealth. Lula represented Brazil's first real challenge to the patrimonial order. Starting in 1989, he unsuccessfully ran for president in 3 elections, falling short due to his radical leftist rhetoric and rough-cut appearance. But for the 2002 elections, he softened both his message and his image, campaigning in a suit and tie with polished teeth and espousing a more moderate pro-poor, pro-growth message. Promising to clean up politics in Brasilia, he was elected president by a landslide. For the first time in Brazilian history, the PT, or Workers' Party, held the presidency, and it appeared that the ruling elite had at last lost its grasp on political power.
Yes, let's look another thing about political parties, which I want to find out in Brazil. Brazil, political, yes, okay. Brazil, political parties. We can see here above the broad range of political parties in Brazil Congress, the Workers' Party, the Brazilian Democratic Movement, the Liberal Party, the Progressive Party 4, and the Brazil Union. 5 parties I see here. Together control the absolute majority of seats in the Senate and Chamber of Deputies. 5 political parties. Here we saw images, and it was election series from 2018. We can see this photo image. Can we see it? No, we cannot, Alex. Calm down. But we can make these bigger anyway, I believe so. Zoom, zoom, zoom. No. Let's make this a little bit different. We will just watch for another. Why did this so big? Okay.
Their platform?
Sorry. What to... Okay, let's look on Wikipedia. Probably it will be easier. We can have here BBC, something like... Yes, let's look on Wikipedia. It will be easier. Looks like this. Here we can see results. A map of Brazil showing the political parties of state governor elected in 2022. It was 1 year ago, maybe 1.5 years ago. Anyway, we can see, usually I believe they do this in October during spring, fall time. And here we can see by colors. It is quite diverse, colorful map. That's what I want to tell you. And these short names of these parties. Yes, just it's showing how diverse Brazil is.
Power. Lula completed 2 terms as president and undeniably oversaw a broadening of political participation from 2002 to 2010. High commodity prices for Brazil's principal exports, coupled with robust social welfare programs, resulted in a meaningful reduction in poverty levels and a growth of the middle class. As opposed to scaring investors, Lula became the darling of the international financial market for his commitment to low inflation and fiscal spending limits. At the same time, his successful anti-poverty programs made him beloved by Brazil's poor. During the halcyon days of Lula's 2 administrations, Brazil had the Midas touch. In addition to its macroeconomic stability, weathering the 2009 global economic downturn virtually unscathed, and international prestige, it served as a model to the developing world in balancing the needs and demands of both Sao Paulo financiers as well as its indigent poor.
Okay.
Constitutionally banned from seeking a 3rd term, Lula left office the most popular president in Brazilian history. Thus, his hand-picked successor, Dilma Rousseff, had it made. A relatively unknown figure in national politics, she had never held elected office before, but as energy minister and then Lula's chief of staff, she was known as a tough and competent administrator. And more importantly, she had Lula's blessing and was eager to continue his
Lula's
agenda.
blessing.
Things started to turn for the PT, however. First, a huge political scandal known as the Lava Jato, or car wash, rocked the Brazilian political world. It began as a money laundering investigation at a car wash business in Brasilia in 2014, hence the name, and soon expanded to pro-corruption allegations at Petrobras, where executives apparently accepted bribes in return for awarding contracts to construction firms at inflated prices. As dozens and dozens of senators, representatives, and other important public figures, including mayors, governors, and ministers, were implicated, it proved to Brazilians that the corruption problem was a structural one, and that most of what happened in the
People's minds so creative. You can see this photo of Brazilian flag, but it looks like not as globe, but corruption. Like this bag, I don't know, maybe it is bomb, I don't know, and full of money, and instead of stars you can see these coins, shape of coins from this, like fish skin, it reminds a little bit. People quite creative, and it is interesting, but it's nice. I mean, like creative, how creative people can be.
As a result of some form of kickback or another. The political upheaval in turn led to an economic crisis as the commodity boom that had propped up the Brazilian economy began to fade.
What we will watch now, like when we will finish this video, we will look prices for apartments in Rio de Janeiro, because it looks quite interesting to know.
And the political class was unable to make changes to deal with the unemployment and inflation problems. As the twin crisis grew, Dilma was re-elected in 2014 with the tightest of margins since the return of democracy. But the taste of victory for the PT didn't last very long. Only a little over a year later, she had to face an impeachment process where the Senate first suspended her powers and then removed her from office entirely. The accusations were of fiscal mismanagement, allegations that she knowingly used tricks to hide government spending to make it look like the government was hitting its deficit targets. These were as flimsy as they sound, and the impetus of her removal was more as a result of Brazilians fed up with the political class and the economic crisis that continued unabated than any particular crime. The ironic thing was that many of those who ended up voting to end her presidency were guilty of far worse crimes, as the public would find out as the Lava Jato investigations continued. In the meantime, the whole process paralyzed the Brazilian political world for nearly 9 months. It discredited the PT, polarized the country, and sent the most popular politician in the country, Lula, to jail. This development was even flimsier than Dilma's, and many neutral observers found it to be a travesty of justice, and that mostly as political revenge. Thus, not surprisingly, Lula was set free on November 8, 2019.
I've heard about all these events from distance. I didn't look what was happening, obviously. Well, but yes, it is kind of big changes inside, political changes in Brazil, and it looks like I need to look at this more closely, because it is political event which is quite important for 100 millions of people inside of Brazil, obviously. And yes, it is very big movements, big changes, and wow. Okay.
The motive was to prevent Lula from running for office. It was successful. Instead, his replacement, Fernando Haddad, a former Sao Paulo mayor, lost to Jair Bolsonaro in the 2018 general election. Bolsonaro was a former military officer.
And we can see this 2018 Brazilian general election, and we can see alliance for Bolsonaro. He has 55%, but interesting names for alliance: Brazil above everything and God above everyone. It is alliance for Bolsonaro, party PSL, and Fernando Haddad. He has another alliance. It's named The People Happy Again, and also we have that he has 44, close to 45% of, yeah. It is interesting.
An obscure backbencher who had been in the Brazilian Congress for 27 years. An ultra-conservative flamethrower, he had passed exactly 2 laws in his entire time as a representative, but this didn't seem to matter much to the Brazilian public. If anything, his explicitly sexist and racist views and his attitude that the only mistake the dictatorship made was to torture people instead of killing them, as he put it, was for some refreshingly honest. Exactly the type of strongman Brazil needed to solve the problems that PT couldn't or wouldn't. So how has his presidency turned out? Exactly as you might expect. The economy was already suffering even prior to COVID, growing at an even lower rate than his immediate predecessors, but has since fallen off a cliff. He has been particularly detrimental to indigenous people in the country and for environmental protection, claiming that the massive fires in the Pantanal in the summer of 2020 had been started by environmental NGOs.
Never heard about these
Bolsonaro's handling of
events.
COVID hasn't been any better. For months he downplayed it, and Brazil now sits as the country with the second most deaths in the world and 7th per capita. Still, even with his disastrous performance, his approval rating remains in the 40s. Is that a good sign for the future of Brazil? I wouldn't count on it.
Yep.
It's time for Polar Palooza at Children's.
Okay, what I want to look now it is for prices in Brazil for apartments. Just to look for this and would be interesting. Obviously that it is interesting to compare situations and interesting to understand Brazil price for apartments. Example, how much does rent cost in Brazil? maybe in dollars. Oh, maybe I did mistake. Let's look in US dollars. According to Nambia, the cost of living in Rio de Janeiro works out at around 616 USD as a single person per month, excluding rent. It is without rent. Nambia calculates, excluding rent. Nambia calculates the average monthly net income after tax in Rio de Janeiro. Okay. Nambia, it is this website which they were talking about, and here we can see prices, like it's statistic, cost of living. Meal inexpensive restaurant $20, McMeal at McDonald's $11, domestic beer 1 pint $6, water $2, it is 12 UZ or unzi probably. And you can see these prices in case you can look and pause just to look at these prices, and it is interesting to see. Example, milk 1 gallon $4. Bottle of wine, who likes to drink wine, $15. One-way ticket and local transport $2.5, quite expensive. Okay, taxi 1 mile like $3.55. But yes, let's look. Brazil, buy an apartment in Brazil. Apartments for sale. Just curiosity, why not? $88,000. It is $56,000 on map. Let's look this on map. Where is it? Close to ocean, Imbiribeira. Close to Recife City. You can see $56,000. Wow, it is impossible. Like, I mean, like, it's not impossible. It's like, wow. And let's look what you can find for $56,000. Wow. You can do repairs. For sure, you will need this to do. $56,000. Wow, here you can see cabinet, desk. Amazing. Okay. Obviously, you can find another options for $88,000. It is like apartment. Looks a little bit different. Even you can find pool there, and it is already different conditions. You can see even skyscrapers there. So small windows. Why so small windows? This I don't understand. Yeah. This is probably same, close to same location, Recife, or maybe Recife. Anyway, it was interesting live stream for me. I enjoy this live stream. You can find different options there. You can find different interesting history behind. When we are talking about Brazil, we need to understand that it is big, diverse country with population more than 210 million people. I'm obviously not not correct with anyway. It has huge population. Official language of Brazil is Portuguese. You can find some economical troubles. GDP quite was increasing, but they have sometimes problems, especially when they have political issues, this political stuff. And anyway, I'm sure that it was useful for me. Hope that it was interesting and useful for you. In future, I think that I will need to more try to understand what was happening there, and it is quite interesting to find out a bit about Brazil. But as for now, I wish you to have amazing evening, maybe day. It was I wish you that for you to drink tea, to watch a movie, Netflix, or maybe TV, whatever you like. And as always, see you next time.